On today's Eastern Conference edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, as we approach the NHL's trade deadline, lots of talk around the Pittsburgh Penguins. We'll get into what's wrong with them and who could be on the move. And the MVP race is heating up. And safe to say, Auston Matthews is shooting his shot. We'll get into all that and more on this week's Eastern Conference edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another week of Locked On NHL's Eastern Conference recap. I'm Ross Levitan. You can find me 5 days a week over at Locked On Ottawa Senators. As always, it's the Battle of Ontario edition as we cover the East. I'm alongside Mike DiStefano from Locked On Toronto Maple Leafs. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today. Today is Wednesday, February 21st. And Mikey, we are just over 2 weeks away from the trade deadline. And I am so curious to see what Kyle Dubas has up his sleeve.
Yeah, that's kind of the team that I think a lot of people are going to be interested to see how they go about things. I saw a report the other day that Kyle Dubas apparently listening on anyone who's not considered their core. I'm not exactly sure what that means. I don't know how much value there is to players on the peripheral of that team who's considered a core player, and why they wouldn't decide to move on from some of these guys. Does that mean that Jake Gensel is not part of their core? Like, I'm not exactly sure what that means, but this is going to be a fascinating one. The Pittsburgh Penguins, I thought they were going to make a push over the last couple of weeks. They're going to finally get themselves into a playoff position, but it doesn't seem like it's going to happen. They just have been wildly inconsistent. Outside of Sidney Crosby, it just doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of guys who are pulling their weight enough, I suppose. They're going to be a fascinating team to watch for sure. Ultimately, it sounds like they could end up being sellers instead of buyers. And who would have thought that at the beginning of the season?
No, right now they're 8 points out of a playoff spot, and that's entering Wednesday night's action. They do have 2 games in hand on Detroit, and they've got 4 games in hand on Tampa, and they're 9 points back of them. So it's not like all hope's lost, but with 3 wins in their last 10 games, they're certainly not making a case that they deserve to be higher in the standings. But despite having a plus 11 goal differential, and the teams right above them, Washington and New York, are minus 32 and minus 22 respectively. So it's an interesting situation. Kyle Dubas, a first-year GM with Pittsburgh, will find himself in because, again, there's a loyalty to the core that's been there and won cups, the Sidney Crosbys, the Evgeny Malkins, the Chris Lettangs. Beyond that, I would even say, Jake Gensel, for me, is in that category. He was there for those back-to-back cups in 2016-17, but he's also a pending UFA. He's also injured over the next course of the month. So does that affect any trade conversations as well? Well, elsewhere on the back end, Marcus Pettersson would be a great ad for a team, I think, going forward. But is that a move they're willing to pull? Ryan Graves just signed a long-term deal there. They've got pieces. I don't think an Erik Karlsson trade's likely. I mean, $10 million, that's almost impossible to move at the trade deadline. But I'm going to be very curious to see what Kyle Dubas does.
Yeah, he was insanely busy this offseason. You look at the players that he added. Riley Smith via trade. He signed Lars Eller in free agency. He brought in Jesse Puljujarvi in free agency. He brought in Erik Karlsson via trade. Colin White, sure. Former
on waivers.
First round.
Well,
pick.
if you're gonna talk about Jesse Puljujarvi, I mean, they're basically the similar productive.
One's still on the roster, the other isn't. Erik Karlsson obviously being the biggest addition, along with Ryan Graves on the back end. But yeah, they brought in a lot of players, and they were expected to be a competitive team. Noel Chari, another guy you can add to the list of players that were brought in this past offseason. It hasn't worked out for whatever reason. And look, I think there's a lot of pieces out there that probably would attract some teams. You brought up Marcus Pettersson. He obviously would be an interesting piece. Riley Smith, he only has 2 years left on his deal. He's won a Stanley Cup, obviously, last year with the Vegas Golden Knights. He's had a lot of playoff success. Is there a team who's looking for some secondary scoring, some help in that middle six that potentially could use a Riley Smith? I think maybe a team like Vancouver, who's been looking for some winger help. If they don't end up, locking in with Phil Kessel, perhaps do they circle into a Riley Smith situation? I think that's a decent little spot where Carolina could use maybe a Riley Smith. I think that would be an interesting piece if they decide to move on from him. So there's a bunch of dudes out there that could be available. Is Brian Rust considered a core piece? Like, the problem with Pittsburgh is again, if they're moving on from people, like, I don't know, where's this team going? What's the direction of this team? Are they just going to be middling for the rest of Crosby, Malkin, and Letang's career? Like, what's the point, if you are the Pittsburgh Penguins, of keeping around kind of these, middle age to later stages, over the hill 30, 32-year-old players, if you're not going to be competitive? I don't know. I don't understand what Pittsburgh is going to do here. I don't know.
No, me neither. So we'll keep our eye on that. I think the stat that jumps out with Pittsburgh is that they're only 5 for their last 49, less than 10% on the power play with all the collection of offensive talent that they have. Their power play has 1 goal in their last 5 games, for 16.
They went like all of November or all of December without a goal. Like, they already went on a massive dry spell without a goal, which was insane. And like, with all that talent, with you had Erik Karlsson to your back end, how the hell do you not just like eat, sleep, power play goals? Like, I don't understand. Like, it just seems like that would be a foregone conclusion. You've got Malkin, Crosby, Gensel, Rust, and
Karlsson.
You got Letang also. Like, and you can't score on the power play. It makes no sense to me. It's going to be interesting. Do you think that Steve Sullivan survives the season, or do you think maybe they try and make a change at coach before they really throw in the towel, though?
No, I think he does. And Mike Sullivan, Steve Sullivan's a great throwback name.
Mike Sullivan.
Remember when Steve Sullivan got hit in the face with a puck and the fan chirped him, and then he looked back, and then the fan got hit in the face later in the game, and he will. That's instant karma, little throwback there. But Mike Sullivan, I think he survives the year, but this is something where in the offseason, I think they might look to make a change there. He's had a ton of success with that group, and like I said, I keep going back to it, but they're my team to watch. I'm circling them as we approach the trade deadline. Locked On NHL will have all your trade deadline coverage. Make sure you're locked on, you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts. We'll also have special episodes across the entire network, Locked On Senators, Locked On Leafs, and everywhere else you get your podcasts. For more on the Penguins, go check out Hunter Hodes on Locked On Pittsburgh Penguins. But on the other side, MVP. Plenty of good options around the National Hockey League. Our guy Mike here is going to make his case for Auston Matthews, and I will say it's growing with each impressive performance. We'll get into that after the break, and then we'll wrap up today's show with a little who's hot and who's not, looking around the Eastern Conference at the highs and lows as we get into the stretch drive. That's all next. You're listening to Locked On NHL, your team every day.
Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Get your buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NHL players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Network.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Indeed. When you're looking to build a team, you don't look further than Indeed, because Indeed has you covered for all your hiring needs. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills. You can get it all with Indeed. Find top talent fast with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. Indeed does the hard work for you. All you got to do is sponsor a job, and boom, Instant Match shows you candidates whose resumes with Indeed fit your job description immediately after you post. Join the 3 million businesses worldwide using Indeed to hire great talent fast. Indeed knows when you're growing your business, you have to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applicants that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. Go to Indeed.com/lockedon, Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Welcome back, Locked On NHL podcast, your team every day. I'm Ross Levitan from Locked On Senators. That's Mike DiStefano from Locked On Toronto Maple Leafs. And checking out our friends over at the FanDuel Sportsbook, where we always like taking a look at the futures. Who is going to win the league MVP, the Hart Trophy? Right now, as we enter play on February 21st, Nathan MacKinnon is the favorite from the Colorado Avalanche at plus 160. Nikita Kucherov is at plus 270. Connor McDavid is at plus 340. Auston Matthews at plus 440. And then you're getting to the long shots after that. David Pastrnak at plus 2,000 and Connor Hellebuyck at plus 3,500. Who is your MVP so far, 50 plus games into the season?
Well, I think that if I had to guess today, or as of a week ago, I guess, I would have said Nathan MacKinnon. But this Auston Matthews is making quite the run at that title, is he not? I mean, you look at what this guy's doing right now. If he scores tonight, and he still has, tons of games left in this month, but he could have 50 goals by February 21st. Like, he plays the Arizona Coyotes tonight in his hometown, home state of Arizona. Could have friends and family. Good chance he does score. That'll be 50 goals in February. I mean, it's just outstanding stuff. He had back-to-back hat tricks earlier this week as well. And when you talk about MVP, most valuable player, putting a team on your back, I mean, that's really what this guy has done. The Leafs, in my opinion, obviously I watched this team very closely. They really struggle with a lack of goal scoring from guys outside of their top four. And Auston Matthews, the nights he doesn't score, this team doesn't win a whole lot of hockey games. So I think when you look at this team and you look at this award, Matthews has got to start really gaining a lot of momentum here. And I think it's just because of the amount of goals he's going to finish with. I mean, how do you not give it to somebody if he does finish the year with 70 plus goals? How do you not give it to him? I remember there was a quote the year that Matthews did win his first Hart a couple of years ago. Sheldon Keefe came out and said, well, the main objective is the game is to score more goals than your other team. And when a guy like Auston is scoring the most goals in the NHL, how's that not the most valuable player, right? That was kind of his campaign for his guy to get the MVP. And I think the same rings true now and even more. Like Matthews had 60 that year. If he scores 70 goals, I think that would just be just an unbelievable year. And I just think that Matthews needs to get a little bit more love for the MVP. Being, would you say, fourth or fifth? Is he right now? Fourth? I don't know, man. I think he probably, to me, I think MacKinnon might be just a smidge ahead right now. But when all said and done, if Matthews continues onto this trajectory and finishes the year with 70 plus goals, I think that's gotta be the deciding factor here. I honestly, I think Auston Matthews deserves some more love here in the MVP race.
Yeah, fair enough. And he's cut his odds in half just in the last week. Ton of goal scoring, but like Nathan MacKinnon's the favorite for a reason. This guy's had a point in every single home game so far this season. And overall, in 57 games, he has points in 47 of them. So his consistency has just been ridiculous. And now he's at 92 points, second in the league. I'm never counting out Connor McDavid as well, because if Edmonton wins the Pacific Division after being in last place in November, and he's the biggest reason, I mean, that's got to be good for something. The dark horse here at plus 10,000, Mikey, is Matthew Tkachuk for me. He leads the NHL in points since January 1st, and the Florida Panthers are 2 points away from having the best record in the National Hockey League. How is nobody on the Florida Panthers better than 10,000 to 1 odds?
Yeah, it's kind of wild. It's kind of wild. I like that, actually. I might go make a little sprinkle on FanDuel with that one, Matty Tkachuk.
They're 9-1 in their last 10 games. They're
Yeah.
a wagon. They play the bring in the alley and beat you up type of play. He's got the name recognition that voters like as well. Now, has he had help? For sure. Sam Reinhart has the same amount of odds as Matthew Tkachuk, but I think Tkachuk's a dark horse pick out of the Eastern Conference, and I love him at that price. But like anyone, you could make an argument, I think, for a lot of guys this year. Now, I think for a situation like Vancouver, they kind of cancel each other out with Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson, who is the MVP even of that team versus overall. But any of those top four that we discussed, maybe Kucherov a little on the outside because the team hasn't necessarily had that much success. And I'm a goalie hugger. I got to give some stick taps to Connor Hellebuck, who's only allowed more than 3 goals in a game once in the last 33 starts, which is just
wild.
Talk about being your most valuable player. That's giving your team a chance to win every single night.
Well, if you want to talk about how much do you believe in primary points? Like, is that a strong factor for you when you think about, a player and how dominant they are and how important they are to their team, the primary points?
I like it, but you see often where a guy brings the puck up, has his own exit, zone entry, dumps it off, and then it's a one-touch pass and it's in the back of the net. Because I feel like McDavid probably has a ton of secondary points where you're like, oh, that goal doesn't happen unless it's for Connor McDavid.
Sure, I suppose, but Auston Matthews leads the league in primary points at 5-on-5.
Well, yeah, because a goal is how you get that, and he leads the league in goals.
Well, I'm just saying.
And at 5-on-5, because Sam Reinhart has as many power play goals as the entire Chicago Blackhawks team.
Yeah, that's actually wild.
22 power play goals for Sam Reinhart, tied with the Hawks and the Blue Jackets.
Auston Matthews has, what's the number here? 21 less points than Kucherov and 19 less points than McKinnon, yet has more primary points at 5-on-5 than both of those players.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting argument.
That's all I'm saying. It's like, because a lot of people look at the points overall, but if you break it down into points at 5-on-5, like Kucherov, 40 of his 94 points this year have been on the power play. 40 of his 94. Matthews, only 22 of his 73 points have been on the power play. Like, even strength-wise, he's right up there. He's right behind. So McKinnon leads the NHL 58 points at even strength. And then you've got Kucherov and McDavid at 54. And then Matthews and Pasternak at 50. So there's only an 8-point buffer in even strength points. But if you break it down into one more little layer to primary points, Auston Matthews leads the NHL with 37.
Interesting. We'll be keeping an eye on this throughout the rest of the season. Leave us a note in the comments. Who's your MVP so far this season? We'll have more conversation on the other side. Some players who are really jumping out and having some great stretches. We'll highlight them next. This is Locked On NHL, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. It's the drive, it's the passion, and it's the determination to get you where you need to go. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home the win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back. Locked On NHL Eastern Conference Roundup every Wednesday on Locked On NHL, your team every day. I'm Ross Levitan over at Locked On Ottawa Senators. Mike DiStefano is at Locked On Toronto Maple Leafs. And it's going to be hard for us to do this segment here because the first player we want to talk about is Juraj Slafkovsky of the Montreal Canadiens. This guy was a first overall pick just 2 drafts ago, jumped right in the National Hockey League and struggled. 4 goals in his rookie season. But he's on the longest point streak by a teenager in Montreal Canadiens history. It's not every franchise where when I look at the record books where something's like, oh, wow, that's special. But Montreal, any original 6 team, really? That's a long history. And for him to be the longest point streak of any teenager, it's definitely worth a mention here on Locked On NHL.
Yeah, I mean it's impressive. Absolutely, we're looking at a span of what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games that he's played now. 8 games in a row with a point, and he's finally turning into that player that I think the Montreal Canadiens were hoping he would become when they took a number 1 overall. But in that time span, he's got 2, 4, 5, 6.
12.
9, 11, 12, 12 points. Yeah, 12 points in that span here. And he's scoring, he's playing with confidence. That whole line's looking really good. So Uri Slafkovsky, I don't know if necessarily people were legitimately throwing around the B word when it came to him, calling him a bust last year or a reach pick. But this should be, an example of why you don't say that about a player until many years down the road. I mean, calling
Well,
someone a bust a year or two down the road is just ridiculous.
I mean, I know this is the Eastern Conference edition, but like Quentin Byfield is the perfect example of that for what he did last night.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, not to throw shade that way, but if there was one guy who was consistently talking about how the Ottawa Senators got not the best, but the top 2 players in that draft, I think it was, you've said that many times. Quinn Byfield.
I still stand by it.
You still think that Timmy Stu and Sanderson are better in Byfield?
I don't even think it's, I think it's very obvious. I think if anything, like I put Lucas Raymond ahead of Quentin Byfield right now. The one thing with Quentin Byfield, not to get completely off track, Quentin Byfield has played about 10 minutes away from Anze Kopitar this year, widely known as the best defensive two-way centerman in the league. So I think you play with him, you're going to have some success, but I'm not taking any credit away from him, man. This guy's a stud. And I think that you knew when he was drafted that it was going to take a little extra time, but maybe let's wait until he has more points than Timmy has goals in his career before we start getting on that train.
He's turning out to be quite the stud. But anyways, that's not the conversation we plan on having here because that's part of the Western Conference show.
But it's also it's a conversation about not labeling players busts when they're 19 years old. Uri Slafkovsky turns 20 March 30th. So plenty of runway. And who would have thought, like, why did it take them so long? I know Martin St. Louis is almost wearing out his welcome amongst Habs fans. We're seeing a lot of Locked On Habs has been, pretty vocal about maybe some lineup decisions that they don't love. However, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to say, hey, I've got this huge power forward with an amazing shot. Why don't I put him on a line with my other 2 best players in Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield? That line's been magic together.
Yeah, I saw a stat. Someone actually sent this to me today. Shout out to my buddy Bird. He sent this to me through the first 92 games of their career. Uri Slafkovsky's stats are nearly identical to Jack Hughes. Okay. 92 games into Hughes's career, he had 14 goals, 37 points, and 5 power play goals. Slav has 15 goals, 37 points. Actually, this was as of a few days ago, so I guess he's doing even better. 15 goals, 37 points, and 6 power play goals. So he's since surpassed those numbers by continuing this point streak. But just goes to show, don't judge someone within their first 100 games in the NHL when they're starting at 18 years old. It may take people a couple of years to get going. And I'm not saying that Slafkovsky is going to be as good as Jack Hughes. I personally don't believe he will be, but I still think he could be a pretty good NHL player. Not as good as the next player we're talking about when we say who's hot, and that is the grade 8, the great one. Alex Ovechkin has been on a tear, actually, Ross. This is not something that we expected to see, but coming out of the All-Star break, I mean, we were going into the All-Star break thinking, oh man, he may not even break the record anymore. What's going to happen with Ovi? Is he even going to get to 20 goals this year? Well, I think it's safe to say he's going to get to 20 because he's rattled off, 7 goals in 7 games since the All-Star break. Alex Ovechkin is red hot right now, Ross, and it is good to see, my friend. Good to see.
9-game point streak, 8 goals, 13 points over that span. Washington, though, another team where it's like, what the heck is going on there? Much like Pittsburgh. Look, they had their glory. They had their cup champs. I know just one for Washington, but hey, that's something you can never take away from Ovi. And this goal streak, it's coming down, right? Like it's going to be maybe even next year. It could be as soon as that. 838 goals now. The record 894 for Wayne Gretzky. So good to see, man. It's a long time coming. He's only got 16 goals this year. So if he can get that up to 30, I mean, we're going to be on the watch late next season, hopefully.
Possible, man. I think it's very possible the way that he's playing. And here's the thing. The shooting percentage was so low. And if you look at all the numbers for scoring chances, high danger chance, expected goals, the amount of shots that he was getting off, like it didn't make sense that he was scoring so little. Like a lot of it was just bad puck luck. And now the luck is starting to turn his way. And it seems like everything he's shooting on net is going into the back of the goal. So hopefully that can continue, and he can continue to balance out those scales, and we can see him inch closer and closer to that goal scoring record.
On the other side of things, on my hot seat, you could even say, is the Tampa Bay Lightning. Like, they are not impressive at all. Ottawa just went down there, beat them 4-2. Andrei Vasilevskiy, has he ever had a save percentage in the 800s? He's got an 896 save percentage, dude. Like, that is so uncharacteristic for them. And they're, look, it's the cost of winning. You lose players that were depth studs on your team, and they have to leave. Like, if this team still had Blake Coleman, if this team still had Andre Palat, Alex Killorn, Tyler Johnson, you name it, they would have more depth. But now they're stuck in a situation where they need their Nick Pauls and Brandon Hagels to carry beyond the first line, the guys they locked up long term, and it's just not happening. They're a one-line team that kills you on the power play. The Sergachev injury hurts, but they were an uninspired team the other night that I saw, and like, I wouldn't be surprised if they missed the playoffs, honestly. I really wouldn't, unless their goaltending figures it out.
I mean, it's so hard to criticize that goaltending and not just like assume that Vasilevsky's going to rebound. But I mean, he's coming off
all
a pretty
low blocker. All four
off,
goals he let in against Ottawa were low blocker.
He's coming off a pretty serious injury, and is that impacting him? Is that affecting the way he's playing this year? Perhaps that could be the case. Does he need another full off season to recover? Perhaps that's the case. Or is this kind of the beginning of the end of Vasilevskiy being the boogeyman that he's been? Right? Is he starting to fall off as the best goaltender on planet Earth? Like, he's been the best goalie for the last 5 years. I mean, maybe even longer than that. So it's tough to be a good goaltender for that many years in a row. There's only a handful of them over the past 2 decades, like in the salary cap era, that have, had a career like that. I would say Price, Luongo, Brodeur, I guess. Like, how many other goalies can you think of that have had the amount of consistency that we've seen from Andrei Vasilevskiy? Like, even Marc-Andre Fleury has kind of had a bit of an up and down type of career, when he was in Pittsburgh. So
Jonathan Quick, maybe. I know it kind of felt a little bit low, and now he's back.
For a while, yeah. For a
while,
he
had a 5-year run where he was ridiculous.
Lights out. Yeah. That's a fair one to say. But it's a short list. And it's tough to do. And it's even tougher, like you said, when you continue to lose, players up front and mainly players on the back end. Like, the last couple of years, that blue line got gutted, and now they're sitting there with a couple of young guys and just unable to fill in the shoes of the Jan Rutas, who was a solid partner for Victor Hedman back in the day, and Ryan McDonough. They have yet to been able to fill those shoes as well. Like, as much as they like Darren Radish and as much as they like Nick Perbix, they're not McDonough.
They've got their own version of Timothy Liljegren too now. I think his name is Lilyberg.
Lilyberg?
Emil Lilyberg.
I've honestly never heard that name in my life. And
dude, there were a few players. When we were doing the pregame pod, I had to Google Mitchell Chaffee, who actually scored a goal and looked decent.
I do know Mitchell Chaffee. He played for Minnesota last year, if I do recall.
Okay.
I got his rookie card. Only reason why I know him.
Well,
I know for a fact I opened up his rookie card, and Mitchell Chaffee was a Minnesota Wild at one point.
Hilarious.
I look forward to opening up a Lilyberg rookie card at some point. Perhaps that'll be coming. Bobby McMahon is a guy we didn't talk about. He's got 6 goals in his last 7 games for the Maple Leafs. His rookie card's coming out the same in this upcoming series.
You're hilarious, dude. Mitchell Chafee played 2 games for the Minnesota Wild, and you got one of those photos on a card.
That not me. Upper Deck got that. I didn't physically do that. They did that. That's what happens. You play your first game, they took a shot, boom, they shove it in the thing, and all of a sudden, here you go. Here's the rookie card.
And no disrespect to Mitchell Chafee, captain of the University of Massachusetts right before COVID. So he's got a bit of pedigree there, but I mean, he's not scaring anybody on a Stanley Cup contender right now. I know he's on the 4th line, but like their 3rd line, dude, when I was doing it as well, their 3rd line had I almost said Tom Pyatt, but basically another version of him in Tyler Mott. They had Tyler Mott and Auston Watson. Those guys were 2 players on the Senators' 4th line last year, a team that didn't make playoffs, and now they're on the 3rd line in Tampa.
Put some respect on Tyler bleeping Mott, okay?
No.
He's a good player, man.
Hey,
if he would have been able to stay healthy in Ottawa, you would have loved him. He just couldn't stay healthy in Ottawa.
He had 7 points in his first 6 games, and then he did his best disappearing act after that.
Yeah, literally, because he got hurt.
Well,
couldn't play anymore.
I mean, this year he has 4 goals and 6 points in 47 games. So
yeah,
I don't think he's.
Anyway,
decent career.
How about our Rangers? 8 straight wins.
Our Rangers are buzzing, and the Stadium Series rules. And to anyone who doesn't like outdoor games, you've clearly never been to one, because they are all for the fans who go there. I went and froze my ass off in Ottawa in 2017, minus 25 Celsius with the wind chill. The beer is frozen by the time you get to your seat. But at least I wasn't a Habs fan that went and saw their team score 0 goals in a 3-0 shutout loss. Had to get that in there at the end. But no, they rule. And MetLife Stadium, I think football stadiums, I know like it was a CFL stadium that I saw it in, so it's a lot smaller. I don't know what it would look like way up, but it's all about the atmosphere. It's about the festivities. It's about the tailgate. I loved it. I love what our Rangers are doing. Igor with a huge win. He might be on his way back.
He's rounding back into form. He's the guy who's rounding back into form just in time, too.
Heck yeah. All right, next week's going to be fun, Mikey. We're going to be a week away from the trade deadline. Hopefully we got some moves to break down. If not, it's going to be full rumor mill next week on Locked On NHL's Eastern Conference edition. For now, though, we pass it on to Power Rankings every Thursday. For more from Mike, you can go check out Locked On Toronto Maple Leafs. They're playing Arizona, a team that they've historically just not been able to beat. So we'll see what they can do tonight. Auston Matthews against his hometown team. And for more from me, you can go check out Locked On Senators. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day.